friends, and welcome to the 5th episode of the Charcoal Selfie series. In today's class, I'm going to be breaking down the steps of how to complete the drawing of the mouth using black and white charcoal pencil on gray toned paper. It is really important that while we're working through these steps, you do actually pause at the points where it says pause and try it, because there are so many steps to creating this mouth, and if you try to watch it all the way through and then complete the steps after, you're probably going to be missing quite a bit. So make sure that you pause when instructed to, and I hope that you enjoy learning all of these steps. Just like we've done for all of our skill buildings for this project so far, we're going to begin by transferring all of our details. And we're going to do this by using either a very sharp pencil that you continuously sharpen to make sure you're getting fine lines, or you're going to transfer with a mechanical pencil. And your goal is to transfer every detail possible. I would recommend lifting your reference picture up, back, and forth to make sure that you've captured every detail. Then you're going to use your hole punched value scale to check and see where the brightest parts of this image are so that you can transfer them when you begin working on your white charcoal pencil. For this mouth, we're going to fill in the front teeth so that they are solid white. So you need to make sure that you're taking your time and really filling in that space. Blow away your dust to make sure that it's not just covering up a spot that you haven't colored, and just double check that you filled it in as solidly as possible. As we reach the teeth that are in the back of the mouth, they do actually start to have a bit of a shadow on them. So in this case, we're going to start pressing lighter and lighter with our white because we want more of the gray tone paper to show through. I did this on the left side as well, but made sure to incorporate just a couple little glimmers that you can see shining on the back teeth. I added some little additional glimmers to the bottom teeth as well. Next, I started shading in the brighter highlight that you'll see on the cheeks that are just up above those lines dividing the section between the cheeks and the mouth. So I made sure to fade these sections because it does start to get a bit darker in those creases right before the mouth. But once we get to the other side of that crease, it is actually pretty bright again. So I went through and filled in those brighter values along the bottom side of that crease. Then I moved on to adding in the brighter highlights of the nose, making sure that I was paying attention to the fact that the center of the nose is a lot brighter than the hoods of the nose. In fact, the hood on the right doesn't even really need any bright white highlights. So I skipped over to the right side cheek and started filling in the highlights over there, making sure to fade all the way out to gray before I got to that crease. Then I made sure to include some of those brighter highlights that you see above the top lip. From there, I started building up the layer of brighter highlights that were just directly underneath the crease on the right side, and also filling in some of the space directly underneath the nose and capturing that line that kind of leads down to the jaw. I also filled in a bright, solid patch for the chin to make sure that I was capturing that highlight as well. The very bottom of the left side of the jaw has a highlight, and that's actually a little bit of the background that's showing through, and the gray section, that little triangle we left, is actually part of the neck. So we're really making sure that we're paying attention to our reference photo at this point to make sure that we're using the details that we actually see in front of us rather than what we imagine a mouth to look like. So I'm going back through and just adding and building those layers of white so that I can work to help form this realistic shape. And this is what it should look like before you start blending with your Q-tip. When you're ready to start blending with your Q-tip and you've laid out all of your values with white as accurately as you can, it's really important to continuously look back and forth between your reference photo and what you're working on blending, because sometimes it can you can get carried away really easily. So it's important to just be looking back and forth and back and forth. Your eyes should be constantly darting from one picture to the other. Now, our goal is first to get rid of that charcoal pencil texture as best that we can, and also we're working to help the sections that are fading out to the gray tone of the paper to have a nice smooth transition. Once your white charcoal pencil is blended out nice and smoothly all the way to the gray, we're going to take our black charcoal pencil and start adding only our darkest values. And remember that when we're working with our black charcoal pencil, we do not want to try and add in any medium tones. We're going to steal some of the charcoal from the other sections of dark and use our blending stump to add those. So we're going through and finding some of these really, really dark sections that are almost the solid black or a value 8 or 9, and we're just filling in those sections with our pencil. I really think it would be beneficial to make sure that you have a sharp point on your charcoal pencil, and that can be sometimes difficult to attain just because these leads are so soft that they break very easily while sharpening. So just kind of rotating your pencil to find the sharpest edge that you do have can be really helpful during this stage, especially while going around details like these teeth or trying to add in very small specific lines. I added a bit of a shadow just underneath that top lip, and then I also filled in that dark patch that was just in the corner of the mouth before moving on to adding the shadow directly underneath my nose. I worked to pay attention to the shape that I actually saw for the nostrils and made sure that I was drawing what I saw in my reference photo rather than your idea of a nostril, which is sometimes a lot rounder than what you actually see. Then I went through and started adding the line in the crease of the cheek that was on the right-hand side. The final area that I added charcoal pencil to rather than the blending stump was just filling in a bit of a shadow just along the top edge of my bottom lip. And after this point, I decided to go through with my blending stump. Before beginning with my blending stump, I just used a scrap piece of paper to double check how much charcoal I had on it before I started working with it to blend in some of my values. So while I was working, I was really paying attention to the amount of shadow that I had in each section before I went through with my blending stump to make sure that I was adding those medium tones accurately. I made a very light pass over those little sections that I left for my gums. Then I moved on to adding those light tones that were just surrounding the left side nostril, making sure to really pay attention to what I saw in my reference photo because there weren't that many dark shadows in that section. I also worked to kind of pull down the value of the right side nostril because it did have a little bit more of a shadow, and then moved on to adding that light value around the hood of the right side nostril. Next, I tried to work on that very subtle value that was showing the separation between the point of the nose and the hood of the nose, and added a bit of a shadow just directly underneath. To fill in the values on the lips, I decided to go back through with my black charcoal pencil and add a solid black line that would help divide the section of gums and the top lip. Then I used my blending stump to help take some of that value from that line and bring it up. I used the value that I had already loaded onto my blending stump to fill in the medium tones for my lower lip. To help match my reference photo and to make this lip look a little bit more realistic, I went back through with my charcoal pencil and added in some of the darkest values that I saw in my reference photo. Then I went through with my blending stump and smoothed them out the best that I could to help them have a nice transition from the medium tone to those darker values. And I incorporated a little bit of the shadow that I saw in the reference photo directly underneath the lip, making sure that it was wider on the sides than it was in the center to help the chin stay round. I also took the blending stump and filled in the lighter medium tone that was off to the side of that highlight just along the edge of the jaw. Next, I came back through with my charcoal pencil to really make a division between my face shape and the neck, like I saw in that reference photo. So I added a solid section with my pencil, and then I used my blending stump to help me have a nice smooth transition and help that look a little bit softer so it wasn't such an abrupt edge. And I blended in that darker value line that I added on the right cheek as well. The final step to this mouth skill building activity is to go back through with your white charcoal pencil, and you're going to really pay attention to your reference photo to help you add in those super sharp, crisp highlights of white that are just throughout that medium tone of the lip and along the teeth. So we're going to make sure that our pencil is very sharp and that we are pressing really hard, because we will not be blending these sections in with a Q-tip or a blending stump. Notice that there are a lot of tiny little dots that are used as highlights to show some of the texture and some very fine lines. So I just went through and made these as crisp and sharp as possible and tried my best to mimic what I actually saw in that reference photo. Don't forget to do this step for the top lip as well. A lot of people do tend to forget that just because the highlights are a bit more subtle. It's always a good idea to make just one final pass where you go back through and redefine some of those brighter highlights, because again, when you're working with charcoal pencil, it does typically disappear pretty easily. So I just went back through and did one last little pass to make sure that all of my brightest highlights were still just as bright. And this is what your final should look like. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this episode. I hope it was helpful to see all of the steps broken down so thoroughly for how to draw a mouth with black and white charcoal. Thanks for watching.